Storytelling is a long-held traditional component of Indigenous cultures around the world. Communities learn about tribal history, tribal origins, societal expectations and morals, land claims, treaties, and explanations about natural phenomena like earthquakes through storytelling. When we think of storytelling in Indigenous communities, often the primary focus is related to traditional methods, where elders impart their wisdom to the next generation. Here, Perry Ground of the Onondaga Nation and Turtle Clan shares the story behind the Two-Row Wampum Treaty of 1613 between the Haudenosaunee people and the Dutch during the Storytelling Festival at the National Museum of the American Indian in 2010. And Jackie Tehuka Nunez shares the story of Turtle Island and the origins of earthquakes in this clip from the Southern California Earthquake Center. Today, comic books and superhero films are being increasingly used as a storytelling method by both native and non-native artists alike. Mainstream comic books rarely highlight native characters. When popular comic book publishers like Marvel and DC Comics do create native characters, they often reinforce stereotypes of Indigenous people either being barbaric savages, seen as an aggressive warrior character, or as being a noble savage who is in tune with nature.
My name is Mark. I'm an enrolled member of the Penelka First Nation, and I'm a comic book enthusiast. East of West is probably the most contemporary comic, or like the newest comic I could think of that features American Indians playing a prominent role in the story. There's an old story by Orson Scott Card called The Red Prophet. That's going back some years. Aside from that, no. I'm not overly fond of digital comics, especially like digital comics that tell, like a longer story. Like the more pages there are in the comic that are like on digital, I just don't like doing it. So when I see native comics, a lot of them are just online. Oh, sorry. And then I really don't check them out that way. It's not my preferred way to read things.
So you would prefer more that were printed?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything? Do you have any thoughts on the importance of being represented in comic books and different forms of media?
Like you got to represent yourself, right? So if you create your own stories, you can write down like what it means to you, pass it down that way, rather than having someone else represent you or misrepresent you.
Native-drawn comic books help to break these stereotypes by improving the way Indigenous people are represented. In addition to being used for entertainment, these books can be used as a cultural and language preservation tool. This is the case in the Dakwakata Warriors, a comic book created by artist Cole Halls in collaboration with the Southern Tachone language preservationist from his community in Haines Junction, Yukon. The series of 3 books even includes a vocabulary list so readers can be introduced to the Southern Tachone language.
So my name is Kayla Shaggy. I'm Diné and Anishinaabe, and I am an artist, and I like to make comic books, and I also make fine art as well. The main character of my comic book, The Sixth World, she's a Diné girl, and her name is Denora, and she's kind of living in this place called the Colony, and it's science fiction with like elements of Diné traditions. So there's a lot of the story incorporates like her identity, her kind of like place in like a new different type of world, which kind of references the Diné creation story on how there's different worlds. And then also she wears like this kind of like robotic suit, and she uses it to help other people, and the design is like a coyote. What inspired me was that I really love sci-fi, and I've always wondered what it would be like to have like, an Indigenous person to be like the main character, because a lot of like sci-fi talks about like, colonization on alien planets, or, reincorporating like traditional myths into like something new. And also I was kind of like wondering like what would happen in the future, like would our population get decreased, and then stuff like that.
As the presence of Native comic books increases, so does Native participation in all things comic related. Red Planet Books and Comics in Albuquerque, New Mexico opened its doors in 2017 as the first, and currently only, Native American comic book store. There is also an annual Indigenous Comic-Con held in Albuquerque each year to celebrate the Native comic book genre. Native participation in superhero and comic book fandoms also translates to participation in the cosplay community, with some cosplayers incorporating traditional elements like beadwork and turquoise into their outfits.
Yatesh a Deza Evans Inashe, Anishinaabe Nishle, Batani Bashishi, so Yaha Dashiche, the Bethlehem Dashmele. And pretty much that's just me introducing myself in my Dene language, acknowledging my relatives, and all of the histories that come with that. So a lot of the art that I do, I'm a multimedia artist, so I do stuff with textiles, I do stuff digitally, and also, just working with silversmithing and all of these different mediums. And a few years ago, I began seriously cosplaying and creating costumes. And since then, I've kind of labeled myself as a cosplay artist, because the way I view cosplaying is taking all of these different skills that I've learned while in art school, but being able to apply them in this cosplaying medium, pretty much. And so, yeah, I'm combining a whole bunch of different areas of art form. When I started cosplaying, I never really thought about, connecting it to my native culture. It just kind of was something that I was like, oh, this might actually be kind of a cool thing. And at first I didn't really think much of it. And then it kind of evolved into my schoolwork. And so that's when I started really trying to look at the connections of pop culture and storytelling in relation to Indigenous cultures, because a lot of what traditions are based off of are oral histories and visual histories. And so while in school, I've been really researching how adornment was used as a way of cultural identity. And so examining how, since I'm 3 different tribes, how does each of my tribe distinguish themselves as their culture? And we can do that through language, we can do that through stories, we can do that through music, but we also do that in a visual way with how we adorn ourselves. And each, clothing item and each design has meaning and has purpose, whether it be practical or some other spiritual purpose. And so when I was first doing cosplaying, I didn't make that connection, and then, I started really reflecting on what cosplaying does for a person. And most of the time when I'm talking to other cosplayers about why they cosplay, a lot of it comes down to identity. And pretty much most people who cosplay are searching for a place and searching for an identity, something to connect themselves to. Because unfortunately, most people nowadays are really disconnected from culture, and all we have is a pop culture. The popular culture, it's crazy. You have something like, the Marvel Cinematic Universe that is huge, and it connects literally everybody on the planet, or close to everybody. And I think, when you start making these connections between a culture that is brand new and a culture that has been around for millennia, it's really interesting to see how they're just interconnected, pretty much. How the way Wonder Woman's symbology of her clothing is reflective of who she is as a person, just like how our symbology in our traditional clothing is reflective of who we are. And so now with my cosplaying, I'm really looking at connecting the stories of the characters that I'm portraying and connecting them to the histories and or overall cultures of my tribes.
With my experience mostly, it's been just trying to let everyone know that like we are still here and we do have modern interests. Like most everyone I talk to, they're like, oh my god, Native Americans are still around. Like you guys like this stuff. They seem to think that we live on reservations and we're not modernized for the most part. I don't know. It's very backwards. I guess I just like to remind people that we're here. We're still here. We're very proud of our culture. We can't have that without the idea of assimilation too, and we can bring that to the table in an appreciative environment as well. The one that I'm mainly focused on right now is Ace from One Piece. He actually is a half Indigenous character. He's somebody that I really relate to as well, just because like not a lot of people seem to realize that he is. He's very pale in comparison. And whenever I tell people like, oh no, his dad is Indigenous, people are like, what? So I like to use that, kind of remind people as well. Comic books, I haven't had a good experience with. I've kind of backed off from that because racism is very rampant there. No one wants to hear about anything Native related. My fiance is actually an Indigenous artist who's also into comic books, and she's gotten hate for trying to race bend characters before, so I kind of stay away from that. I think I feel safer with the anime community just because One Piece as well, that's what I stick with, because it does Indigenous protagonists, and the more open-minded people are willing to listen, and I'm willing to share, and it makes me want to do better and to learn more so that I can accurately bring forward our ideas and my people.
Ultimately, greater and more representative images of Native people in mainstream media is a way to empower Indigenous youth and improve their self-confidence in using Native language or dressing in traditional clothing.